Welcome to Lab Quilting. Today's show is entitled Kids Play. You are going to learn, along with the children, how to make stretched stars. I've enjoyed working these last few months with Betsy Freeman. Welcome, Betsy.
Thank you, Georgia.
She has been the assistant working with the young ladies, and they have grown over a long period of time, haven't they?
And matured a lot.
And let's hope they're on time today. We never know.
With their busy schedules.
I know, and oh good, here's Elizabeth.
Right from her tennis game.
And then we have Rachel and Anna. And oh good, they all made it. And this is Emery and another Elizabeth, and we call her Lizzie for short. Do stay tuned. You're going to learn a lot on lap quilting. As we get ready to teach a new generation to sew and to quilt, I thought it would be nice to look back and think about the generation from which I learned to sew and quilt. So I've invited my mother here today. Mother, welcome.
Thank you.
This is Virginia Jinkinson, and it occurred to me last week to call her because I didn't know how she learned to sew. So when inviting her on the telephone, I asked her, and Mother, I'm ashamed to know what your answer was, but you'll have to tell the whole world now what exactly happened.
Well, my mother was making a dress for me. And in the process of making the dress, of course, I had to try it on. And when I tried it on, it was so full around the hips. So I said, Mother, I want this a little tighter. She said, oh, no. She said, you can't have it tighter than that. That'll show what you've got there. So I said, well, all right, move over, Mother. I'm going to finish the dress.
Well, that's one way to learn how to sew. And then when you went on to college, you...
oh, I sewed there, but we didn't have a sewing machine. We sewed our dresses by hand.
Well, but I bet they look pretty nice.
Yes, they were pretty dresses.
Well,
they were very pretty dresses. My roommate and I worked hard on our dresses.
Well, see, there are all ways to learn how to sew. And now we are going to teach young adults. Now, another reason that I feel so good about teaching these young ladies is because I'm ashamed to say your granddaughter, my daughter, her only sewing contribution has been this wonderful T-shirt that she did. But I think she does show possibilities because she has put a fin and feather stitch for the mane of that horse that she has entitled Oscar. What do you think of that, ladies? My hope is that someday Amy will call on the phone long distance and say, I'm going to make a quilt. Let's hope she'll do that.
Don't hope too much.
Mother, thank you for coming today. And now let's learn about stretched stars. Our pattern, Stretched Stars, was based on a 3.5-inch square with triangles sewn on opposite corners. And we discovered that if the girls positioned their calico in just the right spot, they could actually develop that elongated or that stretched star design. Of course, you could do just a scrap quilt, couldn't you,
yes,
Betsy, and just make all these just random leftovers. But we did run into one problem, and I wanted to show you that when we started our actual sewing. We realized, because the idea was to simply sew and flip these triangles and keep the square, an initial square, that they were not going to be doing what we normally do in patchwork, sewing raw edges. So we had to design or cut a small triangle that went in each corner. Once that happened, we were able to draw a straight line and almost create that cut edge. Then they could line that triangle up to that position, and then by making certain, now that would not have worked, you have to inch that over so the exact amount of triangle is off each end, then they could simply sew and flip that back, and that would meet that right angle. Now, we did have a little bit of ripping and re-sewing, didn't we?
Yes, but it works well.
Yes, it really does. So that was how we did it. And, oh dear, what happened here, Betsy?
Well, this got too close to the iron, and I think either having your plastic in a hot car near the iron will wrinkle it like this.
Yes.
It just gets warped.
So that's our tip of the day, right?
Yes.
We are going to now go right to the girls. When we worked with them initially, rather than going to the machine at first, we gave them a needle and thread, and they learned how to do that foolproof knot and did some home sewing on some pre-printed squares. Let's go to Anna and Rachel. Oh, that's good, Rachel. You do a full twist. That knot will stay in for a century. That's great. And then you can just feel that fullness all the way down. All right, Anna, now for you. That's good. You can feel it coming all. You are so speedy. Okay, and now I see, Rachel, you took that little fabric that we put together and did your little four-patch with just the hand sewing on the seams. And I think you learned a lesson there at the center, didn't you? What?
I learned how to stagger my seams.
That's right. And you've got one set going in one direction and then in the opposite direction. That's very good. And we are happy to see that Anna did something with that little four-patch. What is it that you did there?
Well, that night I took it home and I got some extra muslin and I sewed this bare patch on the front, and then I left a hole at the top and put batting and then sewed the top up.
How nice that one of the girls did something with their
Yes,
squares.
that's good. That's great. Well, from there, we went right to the sewing machine. Hi, Elizabeth. We spent time teaching the ladies the parts of the sewing machine. I think that was an important beginning. And in some instances, they brought their mother's old machine to class. Now, I made up a worksheet so they could actually sew on paper to begin with. And we had to do something kind of different to start sewing, didn't we?
I had to unthread my machine.
Had to unthread it after you got all threaded. Okay, now show us what we did here. I made several different angles to begin with, and she, of course, put her presser lever down, and then with her foot on the pedal, she got ready to sew. Now we're working down towards that right angle, and she's just following that line. Okay, now show me what happens. Oops, don't go too far. Okay, now put that needle down the machine, bring it forward. That's the way. All right. You can kind of pretend there's thread there. And then down. Okay. Good. Okay, you got right on the spot this time. All right, and then she's ready to go back. Once we had practiced on paper, not only straight lines, but curves also, we were ready to go to the fabric. We had both our square and our triangle, and we'll get that all over here in position. And then here's our square. And then we had, let's get right down to the edge. So there you are, and here's your pencil. Now get that positioned in just the right place. That's good. Get this over here for you also. And it meant, of course, holding or anchoring it down at one side, and then if it would slip at all, she'd have to get it lined up again. And we spent a lot of time going around squares and triangles, and it seemed kind of tedious at some points. All right, then we had all those triangles, and of course, by layering the fabric, doubling it, it allowed her to, that's good, keep that grain line in mind, that's good. She's going around three sides, and then that long diagonal. Okay, and then of course you had to flip that over. Let's see if she did this right. That's good, Elizabeth. Good. And then by continuing, she could just simply get twice as many triangles that went with each square. All right, once that was done, she had her squares to cut out. You can start, can we find that square again? And by cutting double, she can get that cut out. All right, and I think just holding those big scissors and making a nice cut all the way down. Okay. Once that was done, we were ready to go to the actual sewing machine. We had drawn around that triangle, the little triangle, and then had that edge of the triangle lined up with the edge that we had drawn, and we were ready to sew. Okay, ladies, start your engines. Let's get going. after all that piecing, we are ready to do the quilting. We decided on marking it with straight lines, but we did cut our batting out and our backing and basted all 3 layers together. And, well, Liz, you've got a different color here. What did you decide on?
I thought that the plain muslin was just too plain, so I decided to go on a light color.
And I like it. It's, what would you call that?
Probably a pale peach.
It's very nice. Okay, I see you're all ready, and you're just practically towards the end. Let me see you do some quilting now. How many stitches do you take at a time?
2 or 3.
And well, you haven't used a thimble. How are you doing that, okay? All right, well, if it works, then do it just that way. Okay, Emery, now I noticed that you've designed your quilt a little bit different. Instead of doing the triangles all the way out to the edges, you've done just some plain squares, haven't you? So then your stars are kind of isolated. It looks very nice. It looks like they're kind of floating. Let's see you do some quilting now. I noticed that you are in a hoop. How come you decided to do that? What happened?
Well, my stitches were bunching up when I'd start to quilt, so I got a hoop.
Got a hoop. Well, it makes a big difference. I noticed you've gotten a lot done today just while we've been doing the taping, so
Yeah.
it looks very nice. Well, congratulations to you. You're almost towards the end, and that's a good feeling, isn't it? Well, we need to start thinking binding at this point. We need to finish off the quilts. Okay, once we're close to having our quilt done, we need to start thinking about these raw edges, all these finished edges on the outside. And in this instance, Rachel is going to take some of her same fabric and she's going to create a bias edge. Now this gives me a chance to give you a test. Do you remember what this is? Bias. Okay, if that's bias, what's that then? Lengthwise. Okay, which would be what? The straight of the grain. And that would be then what?
Crosswise.
Ah, you all passed. That's good. Okay, now what you're going to do is take that bias edge and measure in 2.5 inches. And you're going to take your ruler and place it down on top of that. And can you see the 2? There's 1, 2.5. All right, simply draw that straight line and you're going to cut that. But you aren't going to be working on little pieces like this. What I want to teach you is how to make a continuous bias. But you want to create those bias pieces that you can fold in half and then place on the outside of your quilt. And then you've got a stitch on the machine all the way around that. You're going to have to machine stitch. And I'll show you how to do the corners. There's a special way on the corners. But you don't want to have to cut all those biases separately. Now here's a bigger blue piece. And what I want to show you how to do is to take a square, fold it in half, and cut it. So you're going to have 2 equal triangles, aren't you? And if you remember math, that what you developed is a 45 degree here. And Rachel, you know what that was? The 90 degrees. Okay. Now, you're going to cut those apart and then re-sew them. Now, I'm not going to sew right now because I think it's a little bit quicker if I just go ahead and pin it. But when I pin this, I want to make certain that that bias edge is parallel. Now, you all know what parallel is. And that's parallel to that edge. All right, once that's been done, then I would come and with my ruler, I would mark 2.5 inches from this raw edge. Remember, that's what I said you're going to need. So line that up, 2.5 inches there, and just keep marking that all the way down. Another 2.5 inches. Then what I do is come and make a little cut right here, a little snip. And I'm going to place an A right there. An A right there. And then I'm going to place an A right here. Then those 2 A's are going to come together. I'm going to come up and put that A to there, and I'm going to sew that all the way across. And you're going to say, what in the world am I doing that for? But let me show you what happens when you do that. When you come and sew that and come all the way up here, then let's pretend that's been sewn on the machine. You create what we call a bias tube. See how that's like a See how it's open in between there? So then you can put that down and finding where you had marked it, in this case it's in the inside, but see where that mark is? You could keep cutting and just go round and around and round. Yeah, it's neat. And then you don't have to go ahead and cut all those separate and sew them together. So that's what you're going to want to do when you get your quilting done. Now, doesn't that make you a little bit anxious to get your quilting done and then you can do the bias tube? Yeah. Well, quilting wasn't all we did in this class. How about these wild sweatshirts? Let's take a look at them, okay?
Okay.
All right. Decorated sweatshirts would be a good way to teach two forms of applique plus fringe. And we decided to present those two designs to the girls. And by looking at the array down the table here, they all went with stars and hearts, didn't they?
All the shapes.
Very few fringe. But we wanted to give you a couple of other pointers about the sweatshirts. Not only do you need to buy it extra large because
Because we're going to cut them open. We cut the shirt open from the waist all the way up through the arm and down to the wrist.
On
and
both
then
sides?
on both sides, so we
Okay.
can work on it flat. And then after we have created the design, we will sew it all back together.
And you did
Makes
have
sense.
another important tip. As you pin and place these things, try it on to make
be
sure you've
sure.
got the stars in the right place before
Right.
you stitch it down. But once that has been done, you can go ahead and add the fringe. Now, for those of you that would like to put some sort of a plaid on there, you need to cut your bias about 8 inches wide, fold it in half, and then this particular fold would be sewn to your sweatshirt. I would use a stretch stitch on your machine so it would have that nice give. Then you could go ahead and either hand cut after it's sewn, hand cut those apart. If you cut this before you did your actual stitching, then you'd have to be careful when you would sew these so they wouldn't get in your way. So you would have that optional choice either way. Now, we want to go to the stars and show exactly how that would work. There is available a fusible bonding material, and show that, Betsy. What
Yes,
happens
it
there?
has a rough side to this paper, and if you iron the
Mm-hmm.
wrong side of the fabric to this rough side, you then can draw your design on the other side, cut it out, and your fabric is now fusible.
I see. Well, you go ahead and iron that while I'm showing the other method, and that would be if you ladies would take and know what your design is, say it's a star or a heart, and cut out a large piece of fabric. As you can see, this purple fabric was pretty large, and I would simply position this about where you want it on your sweatshirt, then draw your star, then simply machine stitch a straight stitch all across there. Then take it to the sewing machine, and with that done, I'm going to let you hold that, Emery, so that doesn't fall. With that done, then I would take those wonderful applique scissors and simply cut away. And of course, you can get very, very close to that straight stitching. See how you're coming right down close? And before you know it, you realize that your shape is emerging. You're getting your star. Once that was all gone, now I'm just going to snip that away, you'd be ready to sew it on the sewing machine. Also, remember, another tip for you is that once that sweatshirt is all cut open, remember how we drew around this on the floor? And then that helped us do a little bit of drawing and deciding how we wanted to position our shapes. I would then set my machine on zigzag and then get yourself some paper. Now, adding paper is a nice idea. Just have a whole big hunk of it. And I'm going to position that underneath my star, and I'm ready to do my zigzagging. I would set that on a wide zigzag, and when I do the zig and the zag, my zag stitch is coming right off the raw edge, and the whole stitch is covering not only the raw edge, but the straight sewing on the sewing machine. Now, as you get closer to that point, remember how we practiced going down narrow? And that's kind of fun. You can control the machine, and as I see that coming down to the point of the machine, I'm simply starting to make that a narrower zigzag. And you'll see it coming narrower and narrower, so that when you get to the point, you're almost doing a straight stitch. Not quite, but almost. Then I would put that needle, you have to get really in close, put that needle down, and then you're ready to turn again. And then you don't have to go too far, and then you can start going wide until you reach that big area again. So that's how you would have fun doing that way. Now, Betsy, what did you come up with? Has it...
A fused heart.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
I just fused it right
How
onto
nice.
the sweatshirt fabric.
I see. And once you tore that away, it was already
It is
fusible.
sticky on the back.
Okay,
yes.
and then that's ready to be positioned. So you all have a choice of which way you want to go, and it makes it very nice. I would, of course, once I did this, I would use more paper, cut that paper, and doing the same thing. And on a heart that's round like this, I wouldn't have such a wide zigzag. I'd have a narrower zigzag. Do you all think you can do that? And then we would use, once you have that all finished, then you're going to want to use your overlock machine. Do you remember the overlock I let you play on? Then you would use the overlock machine to sew up those side seams, and that would be a very good way to complete your sweatshirt. Okay? This is our official class picture, and my official thank you to all of you for participating in the quilt class. I think you've decided it's easier to make a quilt than it is to do television. Is that right? And I have one more little fun thing. Next spring, when the birds start looking for a nest, I want you to throw out, you know, all the threads and the batting you had left over that you found all around the classroom. All right, I want you to throw them out in the backyard in a special place, and you're going to find part of your quilt up in a bird nest. Can you promise me you'll do that? Okay. Thank you for coming, and thank you for being on the show. Bye-bye. We hope youngsters across this country have gotten some inspiration from this show. And for those adults that are teaching those youngsters, we have some do's and don'ts for you. First of all, number one, have short sessions. Number two, go ahead and have the hand sewing first before you introduce the sewing machine. Number three, explain the tools and the terms that you're going to be using. Number four, be very patient. Number five, have lots of enthusiastic help, and that, too bad you can't all have Betsy with you. Number six, be very flexible. Now, someone has also put lunch up here. I think the youngsters got to the blackboard. Don't, of course, forget to feed them. And some other don'ts. Here you go, Betsy.
All right. Don't lose your sense of humor. Don't be too demanding. Don't forget to have fun.
Oh, yes. I remember the first day we came to class, I kept pulling threads off of Betsy's shirt.
You mean like this, Georgia?
Yes, right. Well, what she had done, she had put spools inside her garment. So we did have some fun, okay?
Don't forget to elevate their seats at the machine, and don't expect perfect attendance.
Yes, that does change, and it's hard to fit all of the schedules of sewing and learning into mother's busy schedule and all the lessons, the other lessons they have to learn. But we do appreciate what the children left as they signed the blackboard for us, and we hope that you have a chance to tune into Lap Quilting next week when we will be doing Come Fly With Me. You will get to see those 72 airplanes that I stitched and put on one entire quilt. I wanted to have a quilt that would be dedicated to my many travels across this country. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for joining us today. Goodbye.
Lap Quilting with Georgia Bonesteel is made possible by grants from Family Circle, the world's largest selling women's magazine. Ginger Incorporated, makers of scissors and shears for home and industry. And VIP Fabrics, a division of Cranston Printworks Company, America's oldest textile printer. Georgia Bonesteel is the author of Lap Quilting, More Lap Quilting, and Georgia's New Ideas for Lap Quilting. These books are published by Oxmoor House and are available in libraries and bookstores nationwide.